І, шановні друзі, тепер маю приємність передати нашому черговому доповідачу. Це професор університету в місті Сіднея, Австралія, але американський соціолог Сальваторе Бабонес. Сальваторе, він є представником школи світсистемного аналізу, і ми вже приймали тут чільного представника цієї школи, учня Валерстайна Георгія Дерлугяна, неодноразово його приймали. Але якщо переважно світсистемні теоретики схильні говорити про те, що американська гегемонія або вже закінчилася, або наближається до свого завершення, і ми перебуваємо або в світі такому турбулентному, хаотичному, де відбувається боротьба за гегемонію, а одне з крил напрямів світсистемного аналізу стверджується, що взагалі-то вже все і зрозуміло, хто перехопив цю гегемонію, це Азія і, зокрема, Китай. І це вже теперішній гегемон у всякому разі в економічному плані, то Сальваторе в своїх двох презентаціях сьогодні і завтра відкрию секрет невеличкий, буде доводити протилежний аргумент, а саме, що американська гегемонія зберігається і буде зберігатися щонайменше впродовж цього 21-го сторіччя. Сальваторе, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can I ask all of the students in the audience to stand up?
Так, просимо всіх
Can the students
студентів,
stand up?
саме студентів, встати.
All right. I thank you for attending. And it would be my honor if you could join us in the front. Please come join us.
Думаю, не потребує перекладу, що Сальваторе буде вважати за честь, якщо ви приєднаєтеся до нас поближче в перших рядах.
Come. And also to the professors, the projector is not very good. We're very old. Maybe you want to come to the front as well.
Так, але професори, також викладачі запрошуються ближче, тому що проєктор не дуже гарно працює. Ми всі люди не молоді, маємо проблеми з зором, тому буде зручніше ближче.
How many minutes?
Up to you.
30, 35. Okay. All right, tell me if I go too long. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. My name is Sальваторе Бабонес. I teach at the University of Sydney in Australia, but I am American. I have lived in Australia for 9 years. Today, I will talk about the new economic geography and connect it to the politics of globalization. We have lived with globalization for 40 years, but I don't think we understand globalization. Today is a good time to look back at globalization, because today globalization has come to an end. This chart shows global trade as a percent of GDP and global investment as a percent of GDP from 1970 to 2015. For reference, this is the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991. This is the world global financial crisis of 2008. Globalization really began here in Ukraine in 1992. You see trade and investment both increased in the 1990s. But after 2008, globalization stopped. There's even been a small reverse. Trade is declining, investment is declining. Only a little bit. In 2008, the world reached maximum globalization. Today, we live in a global world, but not a globalizing world. That global world has a GDP of 75 trillion US dollars. But it is not evenly distributed. In fact, globalization has led to a consolidation of the world in 3 economic regions. North America, with 29% of global GDP, Europe, with 24% of global GDP, and East Asia, with 23% of global GDP. The rest of the world is much less than 1/4 of total GDP. Latin America, Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, Central Asia, total 20%, maybe 22% of global GDP. Okay. North America is the largest economy in the world, but it's also very strongly integrated. Over 50% of North American trade is with other North American countries. Over 50% of North American trade is within the region. And that is despite the fact that trade between New York and New Jersey is not included, because that is domestic trade, not international trade. 87% of the North American economy is integrated in one political zone, the United States of America. So North America is the largest economy in the world. North America is closely integrated, and North America has very strong political control over its economy. The second largest region of the world is Europe. 69% of European trade is intra-European trade. But in fact, intra-European trade is probably less than within North America trade. It appears bigger because trade between Poland and Germany is in that figure. Not like trade between New York and New Jersey. Well, that's not included in North American trade. Europe also has political integration of the trading zone, but it's weak political integration. The European Union is nowhere near as integrated as the United States of America. Also, soon the European Union will cover 78% of Europe, not 94% of the European economy. The third largest zone is East Asia. Again, in East Asia, most trade is intra-regional trade between East Asian countries. Again, the true figure is greater than 50%, because when Beijing trades with Shanghai, it's not in our statistics. East Asia has even less integration than Europe, and the core of the East Asian economy, China, has very low levels of governance. As a result, we have a clear hierarchy. North America, the largest region, the most integrated region, and the best governed region. Down to East Asia, the smallest region, the poorest of the three regions, and the worst governed of the regions. Okay. North America is also closely connected with both Europe and Asia. It takes 10 days for a ship, a container ship, to travel from New York to Rotterdam. It takes 15 days for a container ship to travel from Los Angeles to Shanghai or Yokohama. But the connection between East Asia and Western Europe takes much longer. About 30 days, twice as long. In the real economic geography of global trade, China is not in the East. China is in the West. China is not to the east of Europe. China is to the west of California. Even One Belt, One Road, the Chinese trade initiative, does not change that. It reduces the travel time to 20 days, but at 3 times the cost. In addition, GDP per capita in North America is much higher than in the rest of the world. Let me make some very simple comparisons. Germany is the rich core of the European economy. But Germany's GDP per capita is equivalent to the United States state of Alabama. Japan's GDP per capita is equivalent to Mississippi. American politicians on left and right, Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump, complain that there is no manufacturing in the United States. The reason is that the United States is too rich to have factories. In fact, the remaining factories in the United States are in Alabama and Mississippi and Tennessee, the poor southern states of the United States. The places in Europe that make advanced automobiles are in Germany. The places in Asia that make advanced automobiles are in Japan. But the places in North America that make advanced automobiles are in poor states like Alabama and Mississippi. Detroit is too rich to make automobiles. California's GDP per capita, if I look at some of the richest states in the United States, California's GDP per capita is 2 times the GDP per capita of Japan. The northeastern United States, the region running from Virginia to Massachusetts, has 170% the GDP of Germany. And some people say that's not fair. Germany has East Germany, poor areas. The northeastern United States is 50% richer than Bavaria, the richest region of Germany. As a result, rich, entrepreneurial, educated, active Europeans want to move to North America. If you go to any North American university, especially in California, Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, you will find many European academics. But if you go to a German university or a French university, you will find very few American academics. The same is true for business people, entrepreneurs, engineers, in every field. They're drawn to America because America is richer, but they're also drawn to America because of high inequality in America. This graph shows inequality, the top 1% income share in the United States, Japan, and Germany. You can see that in the 1970s, the United States had the lowest inequality of any major country. But starting in the 1980s, and especially in the 1990s, the rich in America got richer and richer. Globalization did not lead to higher inequality. Higher inequality in America drove forward globalization. Japan is very globalized, but Japan still has the same inequality it had in the 1970s. As a result, an entrepreneur who moves from Europe or Asia to California or New York is in a richer country, lives in a rich region of the rich country, and has a higher relative salary within that region. Because American executives and entrepreneurs make much more than workers, whereas European and Japanese executives and entrepreneurs make less. I'll make this concrete. This is chief executive compensation in the United States, on average 12 million, Germany 6 million, Japan 2 million. If you are a globally mobile chief executive, would you rather live in the United States, 12 million salary, or in Germany, 6 million salary? Of course, chief executives would rather work in the United States. And in fact, they do. Consider Daimler, Mercedes-Benz, one of the most important companies in Germany. In 1998, the chief executive of Daimler made 1.5 million US dollars. That's in today's dollars. It was 1 million in 1998, equivalent of 1.5 million today. Now, the CEO of Daimler makes 10 million US dollars. Why did a German chief executive pay rise from 1.5 million to $10 million? Well, in 1998, Daimler bought a US company, Chrysler. The executives at Chrysler were making $10 million a year. And the executives at Daimler said, we're the boss, we make 1 million, you're the employee, you make 10 million, so we need a raise. Okay. In fact, a Daimler spokesperson said in 1998, we always said we have to make our pay structure more competitive internationally. And he didn't mean the pay structure for employees. He meant the pay structure for chief executives. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, several major German and Japanese companies bought American companies, not because it was a good investment. They bought it to globalize their executive salaries. In fact, Daimler sold Chrysler 5 years later. They had no interest in Chrysler automobiles. They just wanted Chrysler-style executive pay. As a result of these differences, there is an enormous flow of people and investment from the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, from poor countries around the world, and even from Western Europe, going to the United States and the other English-speaking countries, because the other English-speaking countries have similar levels of inequality and income to the United States. There's also an enormous amount of illegal capital flow. When people make illegal money, they don't want to send it to Russia or China. When people make illegal money, they want to put it safely in the United States. As a result, this is the face of globalization. This is a Chinese graduate at Harvard Business School, holding in the air the two most important symbols of his life: the Chinese flag and the US dollar. This graduate does not have to leave China to live in the American system. This graduate will bring the American system back to China, because he and people like him see the advantages of the United States style of life for people like them. The United States is a terrible place to be poor, but it's a fantastic place to be rich. People like that Chinese graduate and other billionaires, executives, political leaders meet every year in Davos, Switzerland, at the World Economic Forum. And the World Economic Forum has the motto, committed to improving the state of the world. But the people who go to Davos have no incentive to improve their own countries. Yes, they're very interested in the world, but what about France? What about Germany? What about Ukraine? They live in a global world. They don't live in their own national countries. And this has resulted in a populist revolt against them. People like Marine Le Pen in France, who lost the election, but still won more than 1/3 of the votes. People like Vladimir Putin, who is very popular in Russia. He's popular because he claims that he fights the global elite, even if he himself is a corrupt billionaire. And then, of course, the biggest billionaire of all, Donald Trump in the United States. Donald Trump is not a poor person revolting against globalization. But the supporters of Donald Trump are poor people revolting against globalization. Because globalization is benefiting the very wealthy much more than it benefits ordinary people. Donald Trump is criticized for being anti-globalization, for starting a new trade war. But I remember in 1998, when most of my friends were anti-globalization, when they were marching in Seattle, this is the WTO, World Trade Organization meeting in Seattle. And in 1998, 1999, Americans and Europeans were marching in the streets against globalization. We're marching against global injustice. This was a populism of the left. I remember when the populists were on the left, all of my friends were happy. Today, the populists are on the right, and all of my friends are angry. But the same issues that drove the Seattle protests against the World Trade Organization are the issues that drove the election of Donald Trump. Thank you for listening, and thank you for having me here.
Thank you. І, колеги, прошу. Питання, questions? Прошу. Just use the mic. Okay.
I have a question concerning the famous book by Robinson. Do you know the White Nation book?
Yes, of course, yeah.
So they actually present the argument that is contradictory to what you are saying. They say that the nation state, because they have extractive elites that draw the much of the capital from the nation state. So my question is, how do you argue against what was presented by those?
Yeah. Corrupt elites can be very destructive for a country. Maybe they're destructive for Ukraine. I don't know. I'm not Ukrainian. but they are very supportive for the larger global system. Corrupt elites want to maintain access to the international banking system. Corrupt elites want the dominance of the United States. Corrupt elites often invite the United States to overthrow their own governments. There's no tension, there's no contradiction between the idea that corrupt elites are there's no contradiction between the idea that corrupt elites are bad for poor African countries, but corrupt elites are good for the stability of the larger global economy.
More questions?
Salvatore, can I ask one question? Where do you think this is all going to lead? Do you think it's just going to increase? Do you think people are just going to be able to accept this increase in inequality?
Yeah, I think we've reached a stable new configuration. This new globalized world we live in, where investment is mobile, trade networks extend into every country, where elite individuals can easily travel, is a very stable arrangement. The United States, Canada, Australia, all have investor visa programs. If you're a rich person and you want to move to the United States, pay your $10 million and move to the United States. It's no problem. Right? If you're a high-skilled person and you want to move to the United States, no problem. And we have to remember, when we say the global elite, that includes me. That includes you. We benefit from this world. When I wanted to move to Australia, no problem. I fill out the paperwork, my employer signs the form, I become a permanent resident of Australia. It's easy. If you, the students in the room, want to move to Australia, that's very difficult. Right? So these arrangements we have are very unfair. They're unjust. They're not right. But they are very functional. Because all of you students who consider moving to Australia, will you start a revolution to attack Australia? Or will you wait in line and apply and hope you get a visa? It's a very functional system, even if it is not a fair system.
So, if I understood you correctly, you don't foresee any kind of disturbances and huge revolts, let alone revolutions, against the current system?
No. Believe it or not, this is one of the most peaceful periods in all of global history. Almost all of the wars in the world today are internal struggles over the distribution of rewards within a society. I don't support Bashar al-Assad. But if Bashar al-Assad falls, Syria will not have a beautiful European social democracy. Syria will have a new autocrat who punishes Assad's people and rewards his own people. The Russian invasion of Crimea and the continued occupation of eastern Ukraine are remarkable because they are very rare. International war has almost disappeared from our world. Most countries do not have any effective armed forces. Most countries. The invasion of Crimea is the exception that proves the rule. And to make that clear, think back 100 years. 100 years ago, if a country invaded another country and took its territory, everybody cries, you sign a peace treaty, and it's over. If the invasion of Crimea had occurred 100 years ago, Russia would demand that Ukraine pay a $10 billion indemnity, Russia would withdraw from the east, and Russia would annex Crimea. Today's world is very different. Nobody outside Russia accepts the Russian annexation of Crimea. Because we live in a world that is essentially peaceful. So I'm sorry that you don't live in a country at peace, but the world is at peace, even if your country is not.
Okay, I also have another question. So are you saying that there was no other motive than increasing or improving pay structure of chief executive officers of companies outside of the United States? I'm talking about Germans and Japanese buying American companies and selling them out. So just the only motivation is to improve the
Sure.
Quality of lifestyle of German and Japanese CEOs?
I would not say that CEO pay was the only reason Daimler bought Chrysler or Deutsche Bank bought Bankers Trust. I would say it's the main reason. And I can give you some circumstantial evidence for that. When Americans invest overseas, they invest for a profit. When the rest of the world invests in America, they invest for political reasons or non-economic reasons, like CEO pay. And the evidence is that American investments in the rest of the world, on average, have a 2 percentage point higher return than foreign investments in the United States. Consistently, over time, US investments overseas earn 6% return, and foreign investments in the United States only earn a 4% return. And the reason is clear. People want to invest in the US for reasons that are not economic, that are not driven by business considerations, but are driven by other considerations.
And what about American debt? Is it a problem, or you don't consider it as a kind of challenge or something undermining American supremacy?
No, American debt is, first of all, not very large compared to the size of the economy. It's very typical. But second, American debt is necessary for a dollar-dominated global economy. Remember in 2002, those of you who are old enough to remember 2002, Alan Greenspan, the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board, went to Congress and he complained that the US budget surplus was too big. And he projected that by 2010, the United States would pay off all of its debt. And he said this would be a catastrophe for the global economy because the rest of the world wants to hold US government debt. Put this in perspective. Since 1980, China's foreign currency reserves have risen from 0 to 3 trillion US dollars. How can they hold 3 trillion US dollars? They hold it in federal US government debt. Without the existence of that debt, they wouldn't be able to have currency reserves. So over the last 30 years, China has given the United States toys and clothes and electronics, and the US has given them electronic balances. I think that's a very good deal for the United States.
Okay, and my last question, do you consider Trump kind of a cynical manipulator who employs rhetoric of anti-globalist revolt, or he does have some sort of anti-globalist anti-globalist agenda based on return to nation state and protecting domestic economy, some sort of neo-mercantilist policy?
Welcome, welcome. I'm from New York. I've known Donald Trump my whole life. Not personally, but it feels personal because he has always been there in my life. There is nothing subtle about Donald Trump. There is no hidden agenda. There's no secret program. Anything Trump thinks, he tweets. So no, I don't think there is a cynical, hidden agenda of Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump just says what he thinks at every moment. Some of those things are contradictory, but look at ourselves. Most of us believe contradictory things. Most of us have different moods at different times. The only difference is that Donald Trump is President of the United States.
So what is his agenda then?
I think his number one agenda is Donald Trump wanted to be president. That's it. Aside from that, I think he has some prejudices, ways of thinking about the world. Some are correct, some are incorrect. For example, Donald Trump believes the United States needs a weaker dollar, that if the dollar declines in value, there will be more jobs in the US and more exports. He's absolutely right. He's a businessman, and so he understands the relationship between currencies and exports. On the other hand, Donald Trump is very rich, so he wants low taxes on high-income people. Well, that's a terrible policy. If he implemented his policy, the US government would go bankrupt. So he has very simple ideas based on his own experience. Some of them are good ideas, some of them are bad ideas, but I don't think they are a real agenda of the kind that a politician would have. Donald Trump is not a politician. He's a real estate salesman who is President of the United States.
And why do people vote for him? Because as far as I know, a majority of his voters are not the poorest part of the population, but not the well-heeled people. So people who consider themselves to be in a kind of risky position within contemporary global economic arrangement.
I think people in the United States, including me, I'm American, are very angry about the lack of choices in politics And I think they voted for Donald Trump simply because he is not a politician. Barack Obama was elected in 2008 with a slogan of change, that he would change American politics. And almost everybody was seriously disappointed by Barack Obama's policies, which were more of the same. Barack Obama behaved like an ordinary politician in office, and I think Hillary Clinton would have behaved like an ordinary politician in office. Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders promised to cancel the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP. We can debate whether that's good or bad, but they both promised. Hillary Clinton is a typical politician. She didn't want to make a promise. She finally made a promise at the last minute. But if Hillary Clinton were elected, everybody knows she would not have canceled the TPP because she's a politician. I'm not saying that's good or bad. Politics is a profession that requires training and knowledge and skills like any other profession. Maybe it's better to have a politician as president. But the American people did not want a politician.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.